Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Economy Roundtable on CITV. I'm Robert Zuhl. In the next half hour, some of Bermuda's leading economic thinkers will give us their views on Bermuda's present economic situation and what the future might hold. In CITV's studio today, we have the Honorable Bob Richards, JP-MP and Minister of Finance. Next to him is Nathan Kowalski, the Chief Financial Officer of Bermuda-based Anchor Investment Management and President of the Chartered Financial Analysts Society of Bermuda. And last but not least, we have Craig Simmons, Senior Lecturer on Economics at the Bermuda College and a former professor at Webster University. Gentlemen, welcome to CITV and thank you for coming in. I thought we might start with an economic diagnosis and prognosis of Bermuda. Where are we today? Where do we need to get to? What do we need to get there, and what do we need to avoid doing if we're going to get there? Minister Richards, might we start with you?
Oh, I thought I would be lucky and go last.
Well, if you can.
Anyway, pleasure. Bermuda is, I guess, and we were supposed to avoid economic speak, but the most accurate way to describe it is I think Bermuda is still in a point of inflection. And what I mean is that we are changing from a position of decline and deterioration, which has been going on for 5 years, into a state of growth. And so we're in a state of transition at the moment. And one of the features of such a state is that you have a series of economic statistics which are conflicting, because all parts of the economy don't move at the same time. And so this is what we have right now. We don't have any real positive signs on GDP growth, which is the main, I guess, indicator, but we have positive indicators elsewhere. I think the most important one probably is retail sales. There seems to have been, there was a growth in retail sales last year, and we're expecting a retail sales growth to continue this year. Of course, our much maligned tourist industry also continues to need new capital and a new approach to attracting visitors to our shores. International business has been pretty solid through the whole economic decline. The problem that we've had is that the business model for international business has changed, and the impact that IB has on the Bermuda economy has changed for the worse. So whereas the model for a lot of these companies spun off a lot of jobs for Bermudians, a lot of physical bodies here, even though these companies continue to grow, their capital base is strong. The growth rate may not have been as spectacular as it was maybe 10 years ago, but that's because many of those companies are more mature than they used to be. But the industry has been solid. It's just that the employment profile has changed, and they just don't hire as many people here as they used to. And therefore, that impact on Bermuda's economy has lessened. On top of that, there has been a decline in population in Bermuda. I think Nathan has said it in his publications, and it's something that I've repeated ad nauseum, I would say, in the House of Assembly, is that you cannot have economic growth if you have a significantly declining population. And that may be the inconvenient truth for some people, but it's a fact anyway, whether it's convenient or not. We have a government now that's too big for the economy. It's probably too big for the economy, even if the economy was what it was 6 years ago. It's still too big, but it's really too big for the economy now. And you have all of that overhead that goes with it. The economy of Bermuda, the government of Bermuda is paid for by the economy. And so if you have an economy that's shrunk and you got the same size government, the government's going to run in deficit. As simple as that. To grow the economy in Bermuda, we need to have more what I call warm bodies in Bermuda. We have to increase the population of Bermuda. And in short term, that's going to have to come from bringing people in from abroad. We're just not going to bring them into Bermuda from abroad to do nothing. They have to be productive members of the economy. But we need those people here to help drive economic growth. And of course, I guess I can get this later, but the government is looking for a lot of sort of new things that we can do, rather than being essentially what we are is like, if you like, a 1.5 horse town. It used to be a 2-horse town, but IB is now so big compared to tourism. It's like a 1.5 horse town. That puts us in a very vulnerable situation. We need to change that. That's not going to come immediately. But we are in a point of inflection, I believe, and that area of transition makes it very difficult for those of us who are trying to persuade Bermudians that things are getting better, because it's not that obvious. But I believe that things are getting better, and we have to keep doing what we're doing and do it better to make sure that the point of inflection is real, that the transition from contraction to growth is real and is sustainable. So those are the challenges, as I see, for us going forward. There's a lot of little things we can do, some big things, but I think that the thing that has really knocked us back has been the loss of bodies. It's a fundamental thing. We've had a quiet exodus from Bermuda, and it's not just expats either. A lot of Bermudians have left Bermuda. So we have to make Bermuda an attractive place to not only visit, but to live and work. And once people live and work here, more people that live and work in Bermuda, it'll help to move the economy forward.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Kowalski, could you give us your opinion?
Sure. I actually pretty much going to echo what the Minister has said. I agree with him in a lot of instances. I think when we look at the aspects in Bermuda, we call it carving out a statistical bottom. So what we're seeing is, like the inflection point, things have gotten really bad. So just give you a little bit of sense of where we are, because this kind of helps build this bottom. GDP is down about 16% from the peak back to 2002 levels. We have real retail sales, if you roll them back, are back to 1993. Vacant commercial real estate, depending who you talk to, is 600,000 to 1 million square feet, which is maybe 4 or 5 years of growth in the peak periods. Freight levels, when we talk to the shippers, are back to 97, 98. Mr. Richards' comment about population is key. Population, when we do the work, looks like we're down about 8% from the peak, down 5,000 some people, which brings us back to a level of the year 2000. So we've really kind of rolled back the dial, or reset the base to such a low level that we're kind of getting to a period in Bermuda where the aggregate demand, and basically this is just the general consumption in the economy, is starting to bottom, because as long as we keep the net immigration, or the numbers of bodies on the island, we kind of hit a base. And so some of the good news that we're kind of starting to see, which is getting us a little bit more positive, is the tourism sector is turning a bit. We have, I think, air arrivals so far this year up 4.5%. That's a positive sign. We're starting to finally see an inflection in that. The freight numbers we're starting to see actually were quite good recently. There was quite a big jump. Now, we're trying to work through whether that was last minute orders for some of the projects that are being completed now. But some of it doesn't appear to be. It seems to be that actually some of it is a sustainable level of freight. The other thing we're seeing is job losses are slowing, and we are actually starting to see some people move to the island. So I've heard stories of people giving tours in schools for groups of people bringing their families and kids down. And I haven't heard that story for about 5 years. So I like to hear that kind of stuff. So I'm starting to see some of the aspects in the economy that are starting to stabilize. And again, I think that we need to grow. The level of government, like the minister suggests, is too high for the current size of the economy. We have a denominator problem in Bermuda, I like to call it. It's because we have this debt, this healthcare, these entitlement programs like pensions that are this big number, and our denominator has shrunk. We cannot do that. We need to spread those costs and those entitlements and those future aspects of the economy over a wider base, bigger base, more wealthy base. Either that or the numerator has to shrink. That's the only way it works. So we need to solve the denominator problem. It means we need to bring bodies here.
In other words, denominator is income, numerator is expenditure.
The numerator is the big expenditure, the cost for the island, and that's being borne by less and less people and less productive working people, because you got to look at the workforce, which has shrunk considerably. We're below 2004 levels, at least for total employed. So we need to kind of move that up. And to be honest, if we had to cherry pick what we'd want, which is not really possible, we would want to demographically bring in people that are young and healthy, right? Because the healthcare problem is helped to be solved by people that pay into it and don't use it, right? And a lot of the other problems, like the demographic problems on pensions and such, that's the older people are drawing the pension, the young guys are paying it in. So if I had to cherry pick and snap my fingers magically and bring, 5,000 young people to the island, I think that would be a great boon. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but there's things that we can do and industries that we can target to hopefully move that along.
Great. And Mr. Simmons, could we have your opinion, please, sir?
Just a point of clarification. You've heard this term, inflection point. When I translate that into sort of, what's it called? English. I take it to mean that the economy is getting less bad. So instead of, things aren't quite getting better yet. I think most people are saying that we haven't quite seen any evidence that things are improving. But I think the word less bad is an apt one. The economy, and it's perhaps not politically correct to say this, but definitionally, we're in a depressed state. You can call it a depression. We've been using the R word, recession, for quite some time. And the fact that we're into the 5th year, and as Nathan said, from top to bottom, GDP is off, gross domestic product is off by about 15%, suggests that, we are in a depression. So that's the diagnosis. International business has contracted by more than 3%. The construction industry has contracted by even more. Most of the major sectors have contracted. That's nothing new. The prognosis, I think, is what people are interested in. And rather than base my prognosis on intuitions, which 99% of the time are wrong, I rather go with some kind of formula, but using economic indicators, well-established indicators. The finance minister has suggested the retail sales index, which is arguably the best economic indicator we have. Firstly, because it's current. We have data for the first 3 months of this year. There was positive real growth in January and February, but in March it was negative. And how do you interpret that? I'd like to think that if you get 3 successive months of volume increase, so that's inflation adjusted retail sales, that's going to be a strong sign that we're coming out of the recession. So, just up until the other day, I was, waiting for those numbers to come out, retail sales numbers, because had it been another positive, that would have been a strong sign. But there are other indicators. Planning approvals is a great leading indicator. So if you can go to the Department of Planning and find out, well, how many planning applications have been approved, that will give you a heads up on what's to come, because an increase in planning applications suggests an anticipated construction spending, which in turn will boost overall spending through the multiplier effect. Nathan's already referred to air arrivals. For the longest time, we looked at total arrivals. We all know that cruise ship passengers don't spend very much money. So again, what we call a coincidental indicator would be air arrivals. If you notice that that's up by, say, 2 or 3 months, that's another good sign that the economy is on the mend. Economy-wide indicators, well, the finance minister suggested work permits. That's another great leading indicator. If a number of work permits have been approved, that's a sign that businesses on island are feeling good about the future. You know, it's almost like the Bermuda Stock Exchange. You know, the stock exchange tends to tell people what investors think is going to happen. The same with work permits. I'm not going to apply for a work permit if I don't think that the future looks brighter. Another leading indicator, this is getting into econ speak, it's called broad money. Or, in fact, I think to get to the point, it's more about credit. You know, it's no secret that banks aren't lending. When we see an increase in lending, and to get this information, you'll have to go to the Bermuda Monetary Authority and look through their documents. The specific document is either the Banking Digest or the regulatory updates that they give out on a regular basis, a quarterly basis. And if you happen to see loans, mortgages, and advances going up, that is a surefire sign that recovery is underway. And I say that because banks don't give loans for people to save. If a bank is granting a loan, it must be that spending is coming. So if you see lending increasing, or a proxy for lending is broad money going up, that's a surefire sign that recovery is underway. And then the final one would be payroll tax receipts. If payroll tax receipts are up, or if payroll is up, in the first instance, it would probably be because firms are asking existing employees to work longer hours. But one would hope that in the long term, well, I mean the medium term, that it would mean increase in jobs. So those sort of six indicators, I think, are perhaps a good way to judge, for the public to judge for themselves whether or not the recovery is underway.
Now, everything that you've said comes down to getting cash onto this island, and it seems that the way to do that is to get bodies onto this island. However, the insurance industry is changing dramatically. Things aren't done the way they used to be done. Maybe we could touch on that a bit and talk about some other ways of getting people to come to Bermuda. What do we need to do to get people to come and stay here and work here? Who would like to begin?
Well, I'll start.
Okay.
I think that there's more to it than I would like to add to your question. It's not just bodies, although bodies are critical. Bermuda is in need of a capital infusion. We have been starved of capital for most of the period of the recession. People have left Bermuda. Banks have stopped lending to people in Bermuda, and we've had no investment from overseas, no significant investment overseas in Bermuda. With those three things going against us, is no wonder we've had the experience that we have had. One of the things that my government is trying to do is to get some capital injection from overseas in Bermuda. And we think that we can at least kickstart 2 sectors with that, if we can get the money. One would be the construction sector, if we can get some capital projects, private sector capital projects in Bermuda. and that will result in some jobs. And if whatever it is we're building is a foreign exchange earning entity, then that will help with the intermediate and longer term growth of the island. And we are in the government working on that. You heard on Friday we're making some progress with respect to the Club Med site. Got a preferred exclusive period for a developer. Now I know Bermudians have become extremely skeptical of those things in view of the past history on that. Be that as it may, we feel that the process that we've engaged in to select this group has been such that the quality is a huge quality difference between what we've got now and what we had in the past. So we can get a hotel or two built, and anybody who's in the tourism business will tell you that we have a capacity problem with tourism. Last summer, the minister used to like to tell us in cabinet that all the hotels in Bermuda were full in the peak season, but half the seats on the aircraft were empty. So we've got the airlift to bring people in here, but no place to put them in the high season.
Yeah.
So so we have a capacity problem, and we have had a major shakeout over the period, over a longer period than the recession actually, in tourism, where we've had tourist properties disappear, and our capacity is down, almost like beds are down like 50% from what they were back in the 80s. That's a 50% reduction in capacity. It's just amazing. So we're looking to get some capital to invest in tourism, and other jurisdictions to our south are getting hotels built. Mm-hmm. We have to explore and find ways of getting, there's no local capital to invest in these things. That's a given. In case folks out there don't know that, there is no local capital for these sorts of things. So the capital has to come from outside. So that's in tourism. Insofar as the government's concerned, I don't want to monopolize this conversation, I know, but you got two economists and you got a politician here, so
yes, I understand.
It is what it is.
Right? Perhaps we can move on to some others. We're actually, believe it or not, running a little short on time at this stage.
Just getting started.
Well, we could perhaps extend it and go on a little longer. I think that might be a good idea. So, Mr. Kowalski, as far as from your perspective, we've talked about tourism and new hotels are coming, and that's great. Now, as far as changes in the insurance industry, I was wondering if you might touch on some of the things that have happened in insurance that are changing Bermuda's economic the way that we look at insurance and the way insurance treats Bermuda's economy.
It's actually what's happening in the insurance industry. It's going through a quite disruptive change. The companies in Bermuda, though, let's make this perfectly clear. They're well capitalized, best companies in the world, in my opinion. I still think we have the preeminent domain for reinsurance. I think this is where it's at. I think we rule that market.
That's true.
But I think we also need to be cognizant of what's happening in that industry. So it is a solid, amazing industry, but it's going through a kind of flux right now, and it's disruptive in terms of how it's shifting. So the old model used to be, I'll just use an example. You have a major windstorm, huge disaster. Capital gets sucked out of the market. A couple companies come to Bermuda and they set up, and they actually create 30, 40, 50 jobs each. It's great. But now the market has changed where you have the asset management industry has decided, hey, this is a great investment to diversify my portfolio. It doesn't correlate with stocks and bonds. It correlates with weather. So I would like a piece of that to put in my portfolio. The problem is you have a $30 trillion pension industry. The asset management industry in the world is actually about $80 trillion. But you have $30 trillion in pension money that is trying to fit itself into a $250 billion industry, gross written premiums. So a lot of capital is coming in or trying to find a place in a small place of the industry, and that is forcing pricing down. It's becoming very competitive. Recently, terms have been loosened, and it looks like June renewals will probably be down another 10-15% on top of 25% last year. So the industry is getting really pressured to kind of get even more economical, leaner, meaner, or embrace the new third-party capital model. Now that model involves 5 guys sitting around a room controlling $5 billion. It's very highly scalable, very efficient, and it's not as administratively cumbersome as a traditional model. So really what this all translates into, and I think, is that it's not a huge job creator. It creates jobs, don't get me wrong, but it's not like the old model, which created much more jobs when there was a disaster, when there was a huge surge of capital. The new model with hedge funds and ILS and all the other vehicles creates far fewer jobs. So net, the industry is mature. It's not a high growth industry like it used to be. So I don't think we should look to it to provide a huge boost in jobs or a rapid double-digit growth number. I think if we're trying to do that, it's probably not where the growth is.
So what are we going to do? And if anyone wants to chip in at this stage, what do you think what do we need to, how are we going to solve our job problem? At the end of the day, the insurance industry is going to do whatever it does.
Right.
We have to create jobs.
Well, a key principle, I think, for any small island economy is flexibility. And unfortunately, I think during our successful days, we became overly rigid in respect to rents, expected wage increases. And in many ways, the recession has forced us to sort of think about what normal looks like. We're talking about bringing more people in and increasing GDP, but how far do we want to push this? I mean, are we trying to get back to where inflation-adjusted economic activity was just before the recession? Because I would argue that that wasn't a good place for us to be. There were plenty of jobs. Landlords could very easily find tenants. But we need to remember the social consequences of that breakneck growth. I think oftentimes we forget that Bermuda wasn't exactly a pleasant place just prior to the recession. The economy was overheated. And so the question that I have, and it's one that I think the public needs to get into, what are we aiming for? What is the new normal? I would argue that it's not wherever it was in 2008. It's got to be someplace before that, and that conclusion is based on the fact that most of the growth that took place after 2004 was fueled by debt. And we've been told that there is no more credit around. So it was like our economy was on steroids. Do we want to go back to an economy on steroids, or do we want to get an economy, a healthy economy, one in which young Bermudians can reasonably look at owning property, one where a renter can in fact have some kind of security of tenure? The questions, I think, are broader than just looking at the numbers. And the numbers, I mean, statistics, they say, are like bikinis. What they reveal is sort of is instructive, but what they cover up is vital. And so we really need to talk about the quality, the kind of life that we want for our people. And those are discussions that perhaps shouldn't be had by people like me who love numbers. They should be had by people who love people. Now, how exactly do you, but there's no doubt that the economy needs to get back on track. And entrepreneurs are absolutely key to that. Labor market flexibility is absolutely key to it. There are a number of structural changes that have to take place. The finance minister has mentioned, indirectly, the 60-40 rule. Because if we're going to get more capital into this island, we're going to have to make modifications, either abolish the 60-40 rule, or the Minister of Finance have discretion to get rid of it, not to get rid of it, but to exempt certain companies from it, relaxation of the 60-40 rule.
I'd agree with that too.
So these are the kinds of things that have to happen, but it comes down to entrepreneurs, both Bermudian entrepreneurs and off-island entrepreneurs.
And small business is the key, really. If you look at any study, small medium businesses are job creators. the large mature businesses tend actually to shed jobs over time. So you really want to focus on dynamic, fast-growing industries that you can set up small businesses here that are going to inject capital and hire people locally. I know this always seems to be pie in the sky for some people, but when I look around the world and I look at the industries that are growing rapidly, like the biotechnology industry and the high-tech industry, I would love to see Bermuda somehow diversify into that. I know it seems like a stretch for a lot of people, but I always go back to how the reinsurance industry started here. We did not poke a hole in the ground and out blossomed reinsurance all of a sudden. We worked hard. We did a great job of attracting capital here and creating an industry literally out of thin air. So I don't think it's impossible that we diversify the economy into other lines. I think it would be very healthy for the economy. Who wouldn't want their son or daughter to go away to college, get a biochemistry degree, and then be able to come back to Bermuda to work, rather than having to go to Boston or someplace in California to work for a biotech company, because maybe there would be some kind of research development company here.
I think Nathan brings up an interesting point, and I like to call it optionality.
Yeah.
That many of our problems go back to the fact that we don't have options. You know, we've either been a one-horse town or a one-horse town. You know, in the 80s, it was just tourism, and we essentially ignored that, and we became, you know, an international business center. But options, I mean, you know, Nathan's in the finance industry, and they have financial options. I'd like to suggest sort of a more common sense approach. Young Bermudians, the option that is arguably the cheapest for them to follow is to have as many passports as possible. So I would suggest that young people go and get a British passport, American passport, Canadian, Jamaican, because that's going to make their lives a lot better. Coming back to Bermuda, you look at the Blue Halo project or the seabed mining. These are all options that the government and other are looking at. Now, the building of hotel structures seems to be an expensive option because we haven't had one built in a long time.
30 years.
30 years.
30 years.
No, more than 30 years. Now it's a major hotel, Southampton Princess.
Right.
And we've been looking for
1970.
options.
Yeah.
Very, very expensive option. And to my way of thinking, the best options are the ones that don't cost very much, which is why I suggest that young people get as many passports as possible. Passport must cost, what, $100 to get? But it gives young people the options. And I say that because we growing up in Bermuda, I don't know that we are giving our young people the options that they need, especially as it relates to education. We have failed our young people from a scholastic or an educational point of view. They don't have the tools that are necessary to survive in an international business center. They don't even have the tools to survive in a tourist economy. So we've got a lot of work to do. And there's a reason why I think we became lazy. It's because things were so good. In the 80s and 90s, we took our eye off the ball. You know, and Nathan suggested with the insurance industry, you know, you got to be really, really careful because that industry is in the middle of a transformation. It's no longer bricks and mortar. And with these insurance-linked securities coming online, new ways for the industry to finance itself, you can't expect additional jobs in that area. So we've got to look for alternatives, diversification, whether it be in biotech or seabed mining or ecotourism. We've got to keep looking.
Mr. Richards, I mean, if the future of Bermuda is how cleverly we can reinvent our economy, what do you think are, I mean, and actually anybody can jump in, this is an open discussion, but how do we go about doing that? How do we make this happen? You know, what is the thinking that goes into it? What is it we as Bermudians need to do?
Well, I think that you have to look back at how we got in the tourist business, how we got in the insurance business. Did we get in the tourist business because the government decided that tourism would be a good thing for Bermuda and that the government built hotels? No. Enterprising people saw that there was potential here and they spent money here and they built hotels, golf courses, and Bermudians thrived because of it. Similarly with international business. Did the government of the day decide that, hey, we want to build a reinsurance center here, we want to have captive insurance business here? Now, I'm old enough to know that that certainly didn't happen. I was kind of on the scene when that happened. And it had nothing to do with the government of Bermuda. It had to do with entrepreneurs who saw that Bermuda was a place where they could do business. And what the government did was facilitated the desires of entrepreneurs. It wasn't the government's idea. And people have some idea that somehow the government's got to go and find these sectors that will be appropriate for us. What we've got to do is to create an environment where people, we have to get Bermuda in the sort of forefront to the creative people that create wealth, and they create wealth for themselves and other people, and say, we are here to help you do this in our island, all right? But at the end of the day, the decisions as it relates to new sectors, those decisions are not going to be made by the government. The government is a facilitator of an action that's happening on the part of an entrepreneur or a group of entrepreneurs who see that they can add more value in Bermuda than they can someplace else.
Yeah, I could add by saying that I think in some instances the government has a role to play. When I think about the energy sector, the government has a role to play in essentially getting Belco out of the business of distributing electricity. Belco is great as a monopoly of producing electricity, but the fact that Belco has exclusive control over the grid is in fact inhibiting the growth of alternative energy in Bermuda. So one of the things I think that the government can do is to work or develop an energy policy to make it so that Joe Blow Bermudian can in fact think about ways to create energy and sell it to the grid, which would in fact make our energy sector far more robust and efficient. Another question that I have,
I agree with that,
from a sort of systemic point of view, is banks. I used to understand what banks were for, but nowadays I have serious questions about the role of banks in sort of fueling growth and providing a stable society. Banks were part of the problem. They issued way too much credit, creating a bubble. The bubble burst, and then they say, well, it really wasn't us. And so I have to wonder, in order to avoid this happening again, what kinds of institutions can we put into place, like direct lending, asset management companies getting into lending to businesses, or even peer-to-peer lending? Why do we need to give banks this sort of this position of royalty? But I don't see how they really deserve it.
Mr. Kowalski?
Oh, Craig knows I defend the banks, but the thing is, yeah, I agree with your diversifying the lending options. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's one of the best things about competition, is that it actually creates efficiencies in Bermuda, which would be fantastic. It increases productivity, lowers costs. Everyone wins, right, with competition. Competition is the ultimate cost lower. If you're worried about costs in Bermuda, I tell you the easiest solution is just crank up the competition. That's how it works. Get rid of monopolies. Get rid of the 60-40. I'm a right-wing free market person. I just don't believe in the I let it go. I open it up. To the banks, though, here's one thing we need to really be careful about on the banks. There is supply and demand. So yes, the banks may have supplied it, but somebody wanted it. And a lot of people made bad decisions to invest at the top. So the banks gave them the money, but they wanted the money. Then they shouldn't have wanted the money, and the banks shouldn't have given it to them. There's two people at blame here, okay? We're on the other side of the cycle. The banks might not be lending, but they are lending, by the way. I know they are. The numbers, there's millions of dollars per month that's being lent. The problem is the demand is not there either. So we have to make sure we're careful. There's supply and demand.
How do you measure that demand, though?
Well, we don't have the statistics. So this is the problem. So we can always say that banks aren't lending. They're not lending. But I would ask you, well, who's wanting? Who's wanting? So there's always two sides to the question. You will see it when there's investable options. Like, for example, you would see a huge surge in lending if there was a viable commercial real estate building that got slapped up with 7 stories all of a sudden. But is that going to happen? Where's the demand for that? So there's a demand and a supply side. To your point, we overbuilt. We overinflated. This is simply a credit cycle. And credit cycles take a long time to like work off that level of debt till that debt level is in line with the level of aggregate demand that we have now. So I wouldn't actually expect banks to start lending lots until the demand was there, i.e. the population rose significantly, new jobs came back, new investable options and businesses started.
Maybe I'm going too far into the future in terms of, perhaps the BMA providing a kind of credit guidance, given that banks have proven that they will be irresponsible again. Cannot the regulator provide credit guidance? So when banks are lending, they should bear in mind that they should be lending in areas that aren't likely to create bubbles.
Right, and to your point, I think what they need to do is institute stuff that is not pro-cyclical, so anti-cyclical in a sense where, as the lending increases, the reserves need to go up significantly more. Macroprudential policy, right? So, and I think they're working on that. I think the BMA is working on that. They're doing stress tests, as far as I understand. They're starting that. I think it's getting there. So,
I guess my opinions on banks are well known. I made statements in the budget statement on that. One thing is for sure. Currently, the banks are not conducting their affairs which are in alignment with the needs of the Bermuda economy. We can argue about lenders and borrowers, whether it's a shortage of demand, whether they just don't want to lend. We can argue about all that. The only thing that I know as finance minister from where I sit in my perch, that the conduct of banks in Bermuda is not in alignment with the needs of the Bermuda economy. That's for sure. And it's something that occupies a great deal of my time and my thoughts on how to correct that. But it is certainly one of the things that is holding us back as an economy. If you don't have a significant growth in credit, it's really difficult to make an economy grow. That's why one of the things that we're concentrating on is foreign direct investment in Bermuda, because if you can't get the money from local credit providers, then you have to look to foreign investors. And we are looking at that in the ministry and encouraging that. But insofar as government projects are concerned, we cannot afford to be borrowing another $500 million to be doing this, that, and the other. Your sort of classic Keynesian model is not going to work. Of course, nobody really practices the classic Keynesian model because everybody wants to do deficit financing all the time, not just when the economy's weak. Right? So nobody really has practiced that. The poor Lord Keynes has been misquoted a gazillion times. So we're looking at trying to, as much as we can as a government, to try to encourage foreign direct investment in Bermuda in the private sector, and in some areas in the public sector where we can make arrangements to get a public sector project achieved with private sector money. That's what we also are trying to do. And I could have borrowed more money to build a new airport, build a new causeway, build a new Tynes Bay, build all kinds of, people always come to us with ideas about, oh, we can build this, we can build that, we can build that. And at the end of it, it all comes back to the same point. We can do all these things if you lend us the money, you, the government, okay? We are in a difficult spot as a government in terms of the world is watching how we conduct our business insofar as the debt is concerned. We just got a downgrade from Moody's a week or so ago. And so that really is a wake-up call. We managed to do fine with Standard & Poor's, but Moody's have a much more sort of a formulaic approach to credit analysis. And so we got a downgrade from them. Don't know what's going to happen with Fitch. But the downgrade from Moody's is a reminder to us that, you know, we still have to keep things tight as a government. We just, as much as we would sort of like to, you know, go back to the markets this year like I did last year and borrow all this money, can't do it.
Yeah.
So we have constraints, but the key, from my point of view, is to get some of that foreign direct investment in Bermuda, private sector financing. I still think Bermuda has the ability to add value to entrepreneurs. We still have something to sell. Tourism is still a viable option, and if any Bermudian doubts that, I just tell you, get on a plane for 2 days. When you come back and you fly over Bermuda, you say, my God, what a beautiful place. All you have to do is be out of Bermuda for a couple of days. When you come back home, we still have something to sell. And you just have to get the value proposition right. And that has been one of the areas you talk about overheating. I think we did take our eye off the ball. Some folks thought that, you know, we could forget about tourism, or tourism was sort of on autopilot and we could just leave it alone and do IB, right? Well, I think the lesson of this recession, extended recession, is that we can't take the eye off the ball at all. We can't take the eye off of any ball.
But you know what happens when things get great.
Oh, I know. It's human nature.
It's human nature.
And we seem to have more human than nature.
Well, in closing, Mr. Simmons, have you got a final wrap-up, or?
Well, just one thing, really. I think the public needs to have its own opinions about the recovery process. I mean, recovery is on everyone's mind. And I would go back to these economic indicators that I listed. Retail sales, keep a close eye on retail sales. Looking forward to the data when it comes out for April and May. You know, I mean, I got a sense that, and again, this is intuition, which is 99% wrong, but I got a sense that there was more spending happening over the May 24th holiday vis-a-vis last year. So looking at these indicators, retail sales, looking at the employment data, looking at work permit applications, you know, the public can in fact be inform itself rather than relying on people like us to tell them that the economy is in a recovery. I think that's, to my way of thinking, what democracy is all about.
So it's stop looking to the government, start, what can you do to help your country?
That's the key. Yeah, that's very much the key.
And Mr. Kowalski, in closing, would you?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of what Craig said. Those indicators he's mentioned are things we follow closely, and they do give you a good idea. But I'd also suggest, as we were saying, that it's not up to the government to create jobs. It's up to the government to create an environment conducive to jobs, but they are not the job creator. So it's really going to come up to animal spirits when people have more confidence to take a try, to go out there and start new businesses. You'll start to see that that's what's the generator of new jobs and new opportunities in Bermuda. And I really do think we're near a statistical bottom, and we're carving it out this year. It doesn't mean it's going to feel great. When you go to 10 to 5 and you go to 5 to 6, it doesn't feel fantastic, but it's going to feel a little bit better. But we're not going to get anywhere near from 5 to 10 unless we do something dramatic and drastic. And we get, what the minister said, we get some foreign direct investment in here. We need that. That's a huge driver.
So in essence, in many ways, the government is like a farmer. He can till the field, he can plant the seed, he can water the ground, but he cannot force the crop to grow. He's got to let the crop grow on its own and hope for the best. And with that, gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in. It's been very interesting, and I hope to do this again sometime in the future if we could. The economy is always changing, and perhaps we can come back in and discuss it some more at a later date, hopefully with news of a good harvest. With that, thank you very much for watching the Bermuda Economy Roundtable, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.